Chapter 36. Isabella's eyes remained fixed on the television screen, mounted on the wall of the warren, her posture rigid, shoulders drawn back. The news anchor's voice echoed through the cavernous space, competing with the collective breath of 24 werewolves behind her. She could feel their energy, a mixture of wariness, triumph, and lingering predatory alertness she'd learned to sense over the past weeks. Breaking news tonight, as a major corruption scandal rocks Atlanta's justice system, the anchor announced with practiced gravity. Chief Prosecutor Everett Rogers was taken into custody this morning, along with 3 senior officials from the mayor's office, on charges of attempted murder, evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. The camera cut to footage of Rogers being led down the courthouse steps in handcuffs, his face a mask of indignant rage. Isabella's breath hitched momentarily at the sight of his downfall. Despite everything he'd done, some small part of her, the young law student who had once idolized him, felt a pang of regret. She felt Mikhail's warm hand settle on her shoulder. His fingers squeezed gently, the slight pressure communicating volumes, acknowledgement of her conflicted emotions, reassurance of his presence, pride in their accomplishment. In just weeks, they'd developed a silent language of touch that sometimes unnerved her with its intimacy. "I still can't believe we pulled it off," she murmured, leaning back against his solid chest, allowing herself a rare moment of public vulnerability before the pack. "Never doubt a prosecutor with teeth to back her," Mikhail replied, his voice rumbling against her back. His tone had a hint of humor, but beneath it lay something fiercer and more possessive that sent a shiver down her spine. The double meaning wasn't lost on the watching pack members, several of whom exchanged knowing glances. On screen, the footage shifted to an exterior shot of the police department, where a press conference was being assembled. Chief of Police William Hayes stepped up to the microphones, his silver-streaked hair catching the harsh camera lights. Isabella noticed how he tugged at his collar, a tell she'd observed during numerous court testimonies when he was stretching the truth. "After an intensive internal investigation, we have uncovered substantial evidence of a coordinated effort to obstruct justice in multiple homicide investigations dating back over 18 months, Hayes announced, his jowls quivering with manufactured righteousness. "I want to be clear that the actions of these individuals do not represent the values of Atlanta's justice system." Isabella couldn't help the snort that escaped her. "Nice save, Chief," she said, arms crossing reflexively. "Throw them under the bus while pretending you had no idea." Katerina moved to stand beside them. Her wounded shoulder was almost completely healed. "You should have let me kill him," Katerina said, her voice carrying the faint trace of an Eastern European accent that emerged when she was angry. "I tracked his scent near Victor's territory twice in the past year. He reeks of complicity and cheap scotch. Problems like him don't disappear until we make them do so." "We'll deal with him later," Mikhail said quietly, the subtle shift in his tone making several nearby pack members straighten instinctively. "One battle at a time." Isabella noted the reaction with fascination. Even after weeks among them, the pack dynamics continued to intrigue her, the way authority moved through the group like an electric current, requiring minimal procedural rules or formal votes. The chief continued his press conference. "I also want to address the status of District Attorney Isabella Santos. After reviewing evidence from Detective James Harper, we have determined that Ms. Santos was wrongfully implicated in these matters. All charges against her have been dropped, and she has been cleared of any wrongdoing. A ripple of satisfaction moved through the assembled pack. Low growls of approval, subtle nods of acknowledgement. Standing near the back of the room, Damon punched the air silently, his eyes bright with vindication. He caught Isabella looking and gave her a thumbs up, mouthing, "We got them," with a level of enthusiasm that belied the terror he'd endured at Victor's hands. Isabella watched her file photo appear on screen, feeling strangely disconnected from the woman in the image. Her hair perfectly styled, expression stern and professional. Lips pressed into a determined line, not a hint of the chaos and transformation the real Isabella had undergone. The woman in that photo had never witnessed a transformation, never felt a lycan's breath against her neck, never killed to protect her pack, never known the embrace of an alpha. "They make it sound like they're doing you a favor," Harper muttered from his position against the wall, arms crossed over his chest. He'd recovered enough to move around, though the silver bullet that had grazed his side during Victor's attack had left a wound that was still refusing to heal properly. He'd been visiting the Warren every few days for follow-up treatment. The sanctuary's air system hummed quietly in the background, its subtle white noise a stark contrast to the fraught tension of the news broadcast. Isabella detected the faint scent of coffee brewing in the small kitchen area, where someone had started a fresh pot to combat the fatigue of their overnight vigil. "Optics," Isabella replied. "They need to salvage whatever credibility they can. The department can't admit they were compromised at multiple levels, so they're rewriting the narrative. I wasn't a target of corruption. I was part of the solution all along." Her lips curved into a humorless smile. Classic damage control. The news switched to footage of Victor Aldrich's company headquarters, surrounded by federal agents in windbreakers emblazoned with bright yellow letters. The reporter's voice explained, "Authorities have issued a warrant for Victor Aldrich, CEO of Aldrich Enterprises, who is believed to have fled the country. Aldrich is wanted for questioning related to the murders of 3 Atlanta residents, as well as alleged connections to organized crime." "Interesting how the news that he's dead disappeared," Isabella murmured, wondering what had happened to Detective Turner. She made a mental note to ask Harper when they had a moment alone. "That'll keep them busy," Mikhail said with a grimace that was almost a smile, teeth flashing momentarily. "They'll never find him." Isabella thought of Victor's body, torn and broken after his final confrontation with Mikhail, buried deep in pack territory where human authorities would never look. She remembered the weight of the shovel in her hands, the cold bite of rain against her skin as she helped conceal the evidence of supernatural justice. The earthy, copper-rich scent of disturbed soil and blood still lingered in her memory, along with the primal chorus of wolves howling in the distance as Victor's reign ended permanently. Her past self would have been horrified by the extrajudicial execution that she'd helped enact. But now she understood the necessities of the shadow world she'd joined. Human laws couldn't cage some predators. The reporter continued. "Sources close to the investigation alleged that Aldrich used his financial influence to pressure city officials into burying evidence connecting him to several brutal killings. These sources suggest Mayor Collier was aware of the cover-up, though his office vehemently denied these allegations." "They're circling the mayor," Isabella noted with satisfaction, her legal experience recognizing the language of imminent indictments. She tracked the reporter's carefully neutral phrasing and the strategic use of sources allege to avoid libel while conveying the message. It won't be long before he falls too. Your plan worked perfectly, Mikhail said, loud enough for the entire pack to hear, his pride evident. Isabella felt the weight of 24 gazes on her, some appreciative, some still wary of the human in their midst. The unfamiliar sense of their reactions created a complex sensory tapestry she was slowly learning to interpret. Mikhail's hand moved from her shoulder to the small of her back, publicly acknowledging her position. We successfully exposed the human crimes while keeping our world hidden. Isabella turned away from the screen to face the gathered pack, straightening her spine instinctively. Werewolves of all ages watched her with expressions ranging from respect to lingering wariness. She had earned her place among them through blood and sacrifice, but she remained human, a tenuous bridge between worlds, neither entirely of the pack nor separate from it. The contrast between them was stark in the sanctuary's warm lighting, their eyes occasionally reflecting gold when they caught the light, their movements possessing an inhuman grace that made her gestures seem clumsy by comparison. The worn wooden table beneath her fingertips was etched with subtle claw marks from generations of werewolves who had sought refuge or planned initiatives from the safety of this sanctuary. As she addressed the room, she drew strength from the tangible connection to their history. "This is just the beginning," she told them, using her courtroom voice. "We've cut off the head of the snake, but the body is still thrashing. The same corruption that protected Victor exists in other forms and places. We need to be vigilant." Several older wolves nodded in agreement, while the younger ones watched her with wide pupils. Isabella noted how their body language had shifted over the weeks, from defensive postures and averted gazes to more direct engagement. They accepted her not just as Mikhail's choice, but as a strategist in her own right. The acoustics of the underground space gave her voice an authoritative resonance. Outside, the city continued its daily bustle, oblivious to the shadow council beneath its streets. Damon stepped forward, tablet in hand, his shirt still bearing a coffee stain from earlier that morning. After everything he'd experienced, his eyes now carried a sharper awareness of potential risks. He'd nearly died, and he'd unintentionally gotten his law school friend at the Attorney General's office killed. "I've been monitoring the police channels," he reported, swiping through encrypted communications on his tablet. The blue light from the screen highlighted the still healing cut on his cheekbone, a souvenir from his time in Victor's captivity. "They're scrambling to contain the damage, but more officers are coming forward with evidence they were ordered to suppress. It's creating a cascade effect. 2 sergeants from Precinct 6 have already requested whistleblower protection." The air in the warren felt charged with possibility, the energy shifting from watchful waiting to purposeful anticipation. Someone coughed in the back of the room, the sound echoing briefly against the stone ceiling before being swallowed by the thick tapestries hung on the walls. Mikhail's eyes gleamed with approval, the hazel shifting momentarily toward amber. "And our involvement remains hidden." "Completely," Damon confirmed, standing straighter under Mikhail's attention. Isabella noticed how he unconsciously tilted his head slightly to expose his neck, a submissive gesture he'd picked up from watching the pack. "The evidence chain we laid out points entirely to human crimes and human conspirators." There's nothing that would suggest alternative explanations. Isabella felt pride at how seamlessly Damon had adapted to the reality of werewolves. When she'd first found him in the water treatment plant, dehydrated, terrified, but still defiant, she'd feared the experience might break him. Instead, he'd emerged with a remarkable resilience and a talent for navigating between worlds rivaling her own. And that was without the help of a lichened significant other to act as a guide. "I've been thinking," she said, addressing Mikhail and the pack lieutenants closest to him. She tapped her fingers thoughtfully against her thigh. "We should establish a more permanent system for handling these situations. There will always be an overlap between human crimes and supernatural activities. We need protocols." Katerina tilted her head, causing her dark red hair to fall across one eye. The silver rings adorning her fingers caught the light as she crossed her arms, the metal contrasting with her tan skin. "What are you suggesting?" "A network," Isabella replied, warming to the concept as she articulated it. She paced a few steps across the worn Persian rug beneath her feet, its once vibrant colors muted by decades of use but still beautiful. "People we can trust in key positions. Humans who know the truth, or at least enough of it to help when needed. Harper won't be the last detective to stumble onto our world." "You want to create a shadow justice system," Mikhail said, his voice neutral, but his eyes bright with interest. He studied her with the intense focus that still made her breath catch sometimes, as if he could see beneath her skin to the thoughts forming beneath. The leather of his jacket creaked subtly as he shifted his weight, the sound amplified in the momentary quiet that followed his observation. "I want to create balance," Isabella corrected, using the precise language that had served her well in legal briefs. "The law exists for a reason, but it has limitations when dealing with your world. We need flexibility." Before Mikhail could respond, the television switched to breaking news. The anchor's voice became urgent, her professional demeanor slipping to reveal genuine surprise. "We're receiving reports of an explosive new development in the corruption scandal." Anonymous sources have provided multiple news outlets with audio recordings allegedly capturing Mayor Collier discussing what he calls containment measures regarding the Aldrich murder cases. "We must warn viewers that some of this content is pretty graphic." The gathered pack fell silent as the recording played. Mayor Collier's distinctive raspy drawl filled the room, instantly raising goosebumps along Isabella's arms. "Rogers, this has to disappear. Aldrich's people have made it very clear what happens if these deaths get traced back to him. I don't care what you have to do. Reassign investigators, lose evidence, make staff disappear, whatever it takes. This city operates because of his kind of money. And I'm not jeopardizing that over some stupid sluts who got themselves killed." Isabella's gaze snapped to Mikhail's, alarm passing between them like an electric current. They hadn't released this particular recording to the authorities. They had deemed it too risky since it referenced Aldrich's people, which could potentially lead investigators toward the supernatural connection if they dug too deeply. The tension in the room thickened, a tangible pressure against Isabella's skin. The candles on the nearest table flickered as someone shifted too quickly, disturbing the air. The scent of concern spread through the room, a subtle change in the pack's collective pheromones that even Isabella's human nose could detect after the time she'd spent among them. "Who released that?" she demanded. Her voice echoed slightly off the stone walls, sharp with concern. Harper pushed himself off the wall, suddenly alert. The movement made him wince as it pulled at his healing wound, but his eyes were sharp with professional concern. Not me. That wasn't part of the package we gave my contact at the Journal. Damon was already typing furiously on his tablet, his fingers flying across the screen with a rapid-fire tapping that filled the momentary silence. It came from an anonymous source through a different channel. It's being picked up everywhere. Social media, cable news, and local stations. He looked up, brow furrowed. The distribution pattern is too efficient, too coordinated. This isn't an amateur leak. Isabella felt a chill run down her spine, recognizing the hallmarks of a calculated move. Someone else has been gathering evidence. Someone outside our circle. Mikhail's phone buzzed in his pocket, the vibration audible in the now silent room. He glanced at the screen, his expression sharpening into sudden focus. The calm alpha mask gave way to a momentary flash of concern that Isabella had rarely seen. "It's Jordan," he said, naming the alpha of a Montana pack he'd mentioned having loose alliances with. The name hung in the air, weighty with implications. His thumb hovered over the screen for a heartbeat before accepting the call. "He says we need to talk immediately. Something's happening. Not just here." As he stepped away to take the call, his boots making barely any sound on the stone floor despite his size, Isabella turned back to the television. On screen, City Hall was in chaos. Chief Hayes had made a hasty retreat into the building at the urging of his handlers. Reporters were swarming the steps, protesters already beginning to gather with hastily made signs demanding resignation. The cacophony of shouted questions and chanted slogans poured from the speakers, a stark contrast to the tense quiet of the sanctuary. She recognized the choreography of political collapse. She had seen it before when prosecuting corrupt officials, but this one felt different, controlled by unseen hands. "We wanted justice," Isabella murmured, a sense of unease growing beneath her satisfaction. Her fingers found the scar at her throat from Victor's claw. The raised tissue was smoother than the surrounding skin, slightly cooler to the touch. "But I don't like unknown players in my courtroom." Harper moved to stand beside her. His detective's eyes narrowed at the screen. The scent of his aftershave mingled with the antiseptic smell from his wound dressing. "You're right to be worried. In my experience, when evidence appears too conveniently, someone's setting the stage for something bigger." The chaos continued to unfold on the television, their carefully planned exposure now accelerating beyond their control, pushed by unseen hands with unknown motives. Isabella watched the mayor's security team forming a protective barrier at the entryways to the building. The same men who had looked the other way, while Victor's victims accumulated. Mikhail returned, his face grave. His shoulders were set in a rigid line that the pack immediately responded to, several members moving closer as if drawn by an invisible current. The leather of his jacket creaked with the tension in his body. "Isabella, we need to talk. Now." She nodded, feeling the weight of his concern. "Damon, keep monitoring the news. Harper, watch the police channels. Katerina, double the security patrols around our perimeter." Her voice took on the crisp and authority she'd once reserved for directing legal teams. And she noted with satisfaction that no one hesitated to follow her instructions. "Something's happening, and we'll want to know what before it lands on our doorstep." As she followed Mikhail to the private chamber they used for pack business, the heavy oak door gleaming with age and polish, Isabella cast one last glance at the screen, where Mayor Collier was being rushed to a vehicle by security, his face ashen. Their carefully constructed dominoes were falling, but someone else was directing the cascade. Justice was being served, but at what cost? And to whose benefit? The door closed behind them with a solid thunk, shutting out the noise of the gathered pack, but not the growing sense that their victory might be just one move in a much larger game.